Well, good morning, everyone. Let's see a wave from everyone. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to our first class, or our second ethical will class. Today is Thursday, April 23rd, 2020, and we're going to be talking some more about writing your ethical will. I'm Debbie Marion from Temple Beth Emeth and essay coaching in Ann Arbor and other places. So first I thought we would start out with a speed review of what we did last time. We have a few new people that we're welcoming today, which is awesome. So I'm going to do a screen share and we'll do a quick review of the notes that I sent to everyone, and if you at any point you need them again, I'm happy to send it to you. So let's see, here's our notes. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. Here's the notes that are basically in a Google Doc that I sent to everyone.
Deb, could everyone mute themselves?
Oh yes, let me
Thanks.
let me take care of that. I can do that with a push of a button. Which button it is. Last time the rabbi told me where to get the controls. Bob, maybe you can remind me. There was oh wait, I can see. Okay, so everybody's muted for now. Okay, good. So let's go back and we're going to do a speed review from last time. Here we are at last week, Thursday. We talked about, and these are all from your notes, we talked about what is an ethical will, what will your ethical will look like. It could be a letter, it could be something handwritten, it could be a web page, how long it could be. It could be longer or shorter than 600, 1,200 words. We wrote some lists because I'm a big believer in writing lists to get started writing, and nothing's easier. So we wrote first 5 items that you learned from your family or was a part of your family growing up, maybe a part of your DNA. And then we wrote another list of 5 values or concepts or lessons that you learned another way, maybe from a friend, a lover, a teacher, a school, or in school, or a mentor. And then we talked about some ways that you could frame those lists. And we went through some examples. All these that are in blue, you can click on. In particular, people seem to be real happy about Don. So if I click on Don, it takes me to Don's ethical will, and he was very organized. He had purpose, introduction, few experiences as a child, things that he values, things that he believes in, lessons he learned, things that had a big impact on his life, wishes for the future, and a conclusion. So Don, I think it's got the award for being Mr. Organized. But you can even go back here and see Barack Obama's letter to his daughters, and Stephen Windemiller's list, which was originally sent to me from Betty. Here's Natalie Goldberg's rules for writing practice. I've been studying with Natalie since 2002, assisting writing classes with her, and she has this way of writing to help your words go from your head to your hands without getting stuck in your elbow with the editor that lives in your elbow. We like the editor, but just not yet. The editor, when you need to get words down on the page, needs to go away. And the way to do that is to do some fast writing and to feel free to write the worst junk in America. Here's a list of things that you could do if you're stuck. And I wrote at the top that if you're not stuck, great, just go down to your homework. And the homework for today was to bring a page or 2. Some people might have more, some people might have less. Whatever you have is great. And we're all right now socially distanced, enjoying being in our own home. And one day we might get out into the world. And this young man thought of another way to, he looks like he's in line at Costco or in Home Depot. Oh no, he's at Lowe's. And he figured out a way to be socially distant. So I sent this to my friends in Florida. I said, you could go down to the pool and steal a few noodles and make yourself a little hat for when you want to go out and people are too close to you. Okay, so that was our speed review. And now we're going to, that was looking back, and now we're going to have a speed preview for what we're going to happen in this class. So here's what we're going to be doing. We just did the review of the last class, and this is the preview of this class. We're going to once again write a couple of lists, and then we're going to share like we did last time, and then we're going to talk a little bit about whether you're ready to edit and about some techniques. This is where I'm going to be putting on my writer's hat and doing a little bit of teaching about how you can write in a way that might be memorable. And then we're going to have some time to edit and write, which is great, you know. So if you came to the class and you wanted to do more, this is just going to be some time to get it done. And then we're going to do a little bit, talk about how we're going to share the ethical will, and then we'll talk about the process, what it's like for us. Once again, we'll have a Mishabera. I think that's a spell. I got a spell checker. I don't think my spell check can handle that one. And then we'll talk about what we're going to do next time. So that's the speed preview for this class. So that means that our next on the hit parade is writing a list. So can everybody pull out a piece of paper or whatever you're writing with? And I'm going to ask you to just write a list of any questions that came up for you since the last class, either something you don't understand or a question about writing. I know Betty had a great one that we were talking about before class started. So I'm gonna give you just a couple minutes to think. And it's not like a question is a bad thing. Questions are great. I think questions help us learn. Questions help us figure things out. So don't edit yourself. Just brainstorm anything that you've been thinking of since the last class that might be a question. Ready? Begin. Okay, time for one more list now. I want you to just write it, whatever comes up for you in a minute or two, of what was most helpful for you in last class for getting started on writing your ethical will. What did you find was helped you start to get it done? All righty. So everybody should have a couple of lists, and I've just unmuted everyone, and we have 4, 5, 20 people, which is great. So we're gonna go around. I'm gonna ask everybody to just briefly read something from their first list and something from their second list, and after everybody goes around, we'll talk. So Laura Wallace, welcome. Are you ready?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'm going to start with you. One from each list.
Okay. My first list, I put, I wanted to write about my love of education and books. And the other list, which I made, hasn't really helped me much since then. I'm looking at it right now at my list. I didn't write anything new right now, but anyway, that's enough.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
You're one from each list for questions or anything that came up since the last time, and also what you found helpful.
Who?
Betty Cox.
Okay.
Okay. My question that I've been mulling through, which I've been mulling this week, is what kind of language to use in the writing of this ethical will, where it portrays my thinking, but it doesn't become didactic in the sense that you should do this or you should do that. So, what kinds of pronouns do I use? Personal pronouns versus, you should think about this versus so I've just been mulling over how to make this so it doesn't say I know best. I may, but it doesn't say that. It just,
anything that's a great question. We'll talk about that. How about anything? Any?
I love the list idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that was really helpful. So
Good. Okay. Thank you.
I'll go.
Great. Oh, okay.
So,
I'm just trying to.
I agree with Betty. I was trying to make it sound, I think maybe you were trying to say this, I won't put words in your mouth, but this is how I felt. How to make it sound less preachy and cliche. Like I've just started, thinking, well, maybe I'll just write down all these great expressions that I can remember or come up with or I see on Facebook and just make that my ethical will, because there's always this great stuff out there and I can just list it. And, in a way that's kind of what I want to do. So but I don't want it to sound preachy and cliche. And then I found most helpful was your list of instruction from Natalie, which was write the worst joke ever.
Great.
Because I happen to get tight when I want to write, because I like to make it perfect. So I really didn't get that far with writing this whole thing. So I just let a stream of consciousness get out on the paper.
Great. That's awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, why don't you just put your hand up and I'll just, when you're ready, Stu.
Deb, I was attracted to your suggestion yesterday, as far as content for ethical will, to talk about things you're proud of. And as I sat thinking about that, there's a slight difference between proud and prideful. And the word humility comes to mind. For those of you who have studied Musar, it's a foundational trait. How do people respond to reading others' ethical wills when the person writes a whole bunch of things they were proud?
If your phone is ringing, will you mute yourself? I don't want to mute everybody right now.
Yeah.
So my concern is having an ethical will with a list of things I'm quite proud of, and how do people respond to that? Just everyone's thought on that matter.
Okay.
Something was ringing when you were talking about the difference between being proud of and prideful. Could you explain that again?
Well, to me, proud is kind of I don't have any connotation for that, but when I hear someone being described as prideful, I associate that with being egotistical, smart aleck, greatest person who walked the earth. And I'm concerned about coming off that way with anything I write, with a list of things I'm proud of.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Can I maybe say, instead of telling, a sharing is less prideful?
So hold on a second. Before we answer anybody's questions, which I think is awesome, I think we're just going to try and let everybody get their questions out first, and then at some point we'll be answering. But I think you're onto something about that. These are all questions that we're gonna try and answer. So thank you for chipping that one in. Who else? Karen. Okay, Kathy, yes. Kathy, tell me your list, or one from each list. One from each list.
Okay, so for questions, I have been mulling over. I actually, on like my third page of writing, it's going really well. I'm getting excited about it. But my question was more about like what a good time to present it is. My kids are, in their early 20s, and I thought, well, maybe now, but then, I kind of feel like it'll probably change over the years. And do I send them updated versions each time, or put it on the cloud somewhere and point it out that I've made changes? I'm anticipating that. And then I think in terms of things that I found really helpful, when you asked us to list things that we learned from our parents, that was extraordinarily helpful for me to start that way, because I found that the things that I value the most were really the things that I wanted in my document, and those things I learned from my parents. So that was great.
Great. Okay. All right. Thank you.
You muted?
Yeah, this must be a nice segue to hers. After my mother passed away, I have a lot of writings that my mother did. And I just came across some recently as we're shifting things around the house. And it was really nice to see her writing and to hear her thoughts go through my own head. So that was really helpful. And I think for mine, I'm shifting to grandparent mode. So it is that letter is actually for the next generation too. So that was helpful. And the second list, you had put up the samples, and I read Barack Obama's, and that was interesting to hear his voice too, and addressing his children.
Good, thank you. Who else? Who hasn't spoken wants to contribute one from each of their lists?
Well, for me, the best thing about getting started was getting started. So I appreciate. I'm glad that we're doing this. The first class was spectacular, and it just got sort of the waterfall of thoughts going, which was really nice. And so I've been making progress, but I haven't yet put much down coherently anyway on paper. So that's the answer to the second question. The first question was about questions, and it's just struggling with sort of length and so people were talking about tone and stuff like that. But I would write different letters to different generations, and so it's sort of the appropriate length. And then finally, I couldn't find very many ethical wills that had visualizations other than just words. And I'm a sort of very visual person, so I've been thinking about how to include that and not make the thing too long. So a picture is worth 1,000 words. So if I can find the right pictures, so.
That's true. Excellent. Thank you, Mark. Yes, Trudy. Oh, hold on, Trudy. Let me unmute you. Okay, go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
My first question on my list of questions is, will any of this affect me or my children, especially if I do it while they're living, because there's no following generation? So that was interesting. I thought a good question for me to think about. And the most helpful thing was to set aside time. I had never really, I thought of, you think about lots of time that we have. This was absolutely perfect.
Good. Thank you. That's great. So glad. Mitch?
What was interesting were the lists of Jewish values that my parents gave me as a child, and what for me there was a huge contrast of the ones that I've developed now that I'm the age I'm at. As I wrote further, I realized what guides me most effectively in my life is not to give advice unless I'm asked for advice. So I'm working on not making this like I'm giving advice. That's really never a very effective way to for me to communicate. And then I also have gone through some stories of my relatives that have been deceased, and what holds my interest is finding out who they were and who they are. So I'd like to write it more as not to give advice, but to show my children what's worked for me to make me who I am.
Mm-hmm.
At this point.
Mm-hmm.
That makes perfect sense to me. Good. Thank you, Mitch. Bob?
Yeah, thanks. So I also think that the first class was really kind of amazing and eye-opening. And I think to me, one of the biggest values of having us make those initial 2 lists, like right then and there, it's kind of immediate brain dump. When I went back over the following few days, I found it interesting and almost a little surprising that some of the points or attributes or characteristics that I had in my original list, I found myself not so enthusiastic about. And I also realized that there were some others that came to mind later.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an interesting dynamic because some of them felt more important than the ones that I had come up with immediately. And I found myself wondering why they didn't come up immediately. So it just helped to really leaven that whole process over the course of the week. And then the second comment I would make is, and I haven't made a huge amount of progress on the writing, and I suspect it's because I live with you. And I was thinking of this, especially with respect to Stu's comments about proud versus prideful. And I was sort of starting with the number 1 on my list that I said that I learned from my parents, which was honesty. And I tried to do exactly as you said, which was just to start to write and then just keep writing. And I was shocked that what I started to write wasn't anything like what I thought I was going to write. I started writing a story from early in my childhood of how my mother, in this particular case, one of my earliest memories, taught me the importance and the value of honesty, the context being my first and thankfully only episode of shoplifting baseball cards from a neighborhood store. And I hadn't thought about that story in probably 50 years. But it all kind of came rushing back to me, and I could see myself in my parents' kitchen, and I could certainly hear my mother's voice basically laying out to me the choice that I had to make at the age of about 10 about whether I was going to be an honest person or a dishonest person. So it was really kind of magical.
Well, thanks, honey. That's good. I'm glad to hear about that. Excellent.
That's Debbie?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I think that's so interesting, Bob, because I think many of us have had instances when we were small children of shoplifting and little things like that, either taking something from school that you weren't supposed to, or I remember the very similar incident to yours, only there was a candy store and I took a candy. And when I got home, it turned into an abusive discipline situation, which brings me to one of my problems is how do you take the negativism of some of the incidents in your life and spin them so they're not so, in this case, it's not a talking to, it was a really abusive name calling, physical, So how do you spin it in a way that I usually avoid it?
That's a good question, Alita, and absolutely, I will handle that one as well. I've done a lot of writing about my parents. They weren't abusive, but my mom wasn't always an easy person. But I have wrestled with that question, so we will handle that one. Thank you. Anything else that you want to mention? I didn't want to cut you off. I just wanted to say that.
No, that was fine. Thank you. I said.
Good.
Yeah.
Janet, I just wanted to tell you, I had a similar situation. I was 3 years old and I took a chocolate candy bar. We didn't go home, and then my mother saw that I had the candy bar. We went back to the store owner. He made me actually hand it to him and say I was sorry. And that really, my mother always taught me lessons. It was never abusive. And I'm sorry you had that experience, but it's funny how two people have the same experience, but it's different with how their parents handle it.
Are you talking to me?
Yes.
Karen, okay. Yes, it is. I also was marched back to the store, but marched back to the store like a criminal instead of like a child. And I was under 6. I was maybe 5.
So it's interesting. I think when we start to think about what we learned from our parents, these issues of being when we were young, when our brain was a blank slate, a lot comes up. Anyone else wanted to share who didn't get a chance to? Anyone else? Yeah. Pat, how are you? I didn't say welcome. How good to see you. Pat, would you want to share yours? Pat Anderson?
Patricia.
Patricia.
I'm still kind of struggling with the idea of what the ethical will is actually for and why write one. And why is it called a will? I liked what they had with the Barack Obama as a legacy letter. I like that is less confusing to me than calling it a will. Mm-hmm. But I also was connecting with something somebody else said about finding their parents' writings and going through them and hearing their voice. And I do a lot of professional writing and I'm a poet. And part of me is wondering if what I've written in those contexts might actually serve in a sense as part of this. So I'm kind of struggling with the basic concept of the ethical will. And that's my questions.
Okay. All right, good. Well, thank you. That's a good question as well. Grace and Annie Rose.
Hello. Yes. Well, for me, because I've studied writing with you before and had been in some wonderful workshops, it's sort of like when I started writing a la the things that you were talking about, it just felt like being home in writing, you know, and feeling like, okay, let your hand go, don't edit. And that's the struggle because I'm so used to being on the computer. I mean, even now as we're talking, I'm sort of compiling my computer list and my written list because I'm kind of still toggling, but I find I'm way less prone to edit and stop if I'm writing with my pen or pencil. I'll just keep going. And so I'm trying to just make myself do that and not just be on the computer. And secondly, how much I just love lists. And I wanted to ask you, so if some of it just gets left as a list, what do you think?
Absolutely. So one thing I think we liked about Don's ethical will was Don had a lot of lists.
Yeah.
And frankly, you know, what is the 10 Commandments? It's one list.
Okay, good. I'm leaving those lists then. I got a lot of them.
Yeah. I think lists are a great way to communicate. They're quick. Grace, what would you like to say?
So the thing that was the most helpful, because I'm a procrastinator, is having a deadline. And that was really great.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing that I've been struggling with is sort of, one is including my views of the deceased spouse and the Jewish values about, I think Rabbi Winston said this in a recent funeral, is that the body is to earth, the soul is to God. But when he was talking with my husband about what is heaven, you know, part of his statements were, well, in a post-Holocaust world, we really aren't God's chosen people, and how to reconcile all those thoughts and values.
Okay. A lot to think about. Anyone else who hasn't?
I have a question.
Okay. Wait, who was that?
Miriam.
Oh, okay. And Miriam, and then we'll do Anne and then Mona. Okay. Yes.
So my question is, your mood will color what you write. Should you be in a good mood when you're writing, or just write and then label your mood?
Great question.
Good question. I love it. Thank you. That's so honest. Anne.
Yes. So I had never even thought about this concept. And I would say the most helpful thing in all of it, because I did do the homework very quickly this morning, the most helpful thing in all of it was just actually a Wikipedia article that talked about what this was. It gave some history behind it, and then I sort of could find a better framework for why I might be doing this. So that was really helpful to me.
Oh, good. Good. That's great. And Mona.
I just want to, the most difficult thing that I had and the most questions I had was how, sort of what Betty was saying, just this idea, I sounded so didactic and I felt like Polonius, like my list of things for that advice that I don't really feel that I can offer that.
Okay.
How to say that in a nice way, how to give advice in a nice way is really a difficult thing. And I love lists because I never make lists and I should. That really helped making lists.
Good. 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 I'm glad that helped. Okay. So, and Karen.
Okay. The first one is, I really don't have a question, but I think I have figured out. I don't type very fast. I always write with pencil on paper, and then when I'm completely finished, then I would type it. But now I'm going to type after each question and get it on paper. Because last night I got hung up on 5 things I learned from my parents that I really am happy about. And then this one was my dad's strong work ethic. I went on and on and on and on. I didn't get to any of the other stuff. So that's the thing that I found most helpful is when we started the class, you gave us like these 6 prompts, and it just helped me to, you know, to write on all this. It was the beginning of everything that I wanted to say.
That's great. Good.
Debbie, can I make a comment or maybe question still? Elida.
Well, can you hold it for
Sure.
hold that, Elida?
Okay, I'll hold it.
I'm so glad to have all this participation, but we're going to have another opportunity for questions at the end. Did everybody get a chance to contribute from their list who wanted to contribute? Okay. All right. So I want to put on my teacher hat for a minute and talk a little bit about what we all just listened to. Thank you. Those were all great questions, and also it's very helpful, I think, to hear what worked for you. So first of all, when I heard these questions, and as each one came, there's a part of me that just wanted to answer it right then and there the best that I could from teaching classes all this time. But then I also thought about myself as a student, and I've gone to many writing workshops, especially with Natalie Goldberg, who I really admire. She's just an amazing teacher. And she used to have a little goldfish bowl, and you would put the questions in because it was a silent writing workshop, except when we were in class. So I could put in like 5 or 10 a day. I was just churning out those questions. And at one point she said to me, you know, you're going to have to try and start to answer your own questions. And it occurred to me that I actually could if I spent some time on them. So, which is not to say that I don't want to help all of you, but I realized that most of the time I actually can answer my own questions, but the act of asking them is actually getting me really far down the line. Mm-hmm. So the fact that you ask these questions is your start for also answering them for yourself. So if you want to call the ethical will a legacy letter and that clarifies it for you, go ahead. And if you want to think about whether or not to include something in your document that you feel good about or you don't feel good about, you go ahead. So I would encourage you to actually do some writing and make your question a writing prompt to yourself, and then ask, and then just use Natalie Goldberg's writing techniques and just let your brain go for it. And one of the things that I love about writing is that it answers questions that can't be answered by just sitting and thinking. One expression that Natalie Goldberg will say is writing does writing, meaning that things come up when you're writing that don't come up in life, and that writing is not just recording something that happened as accurately as possible. Writing is an act of discovery. So you might get down to the end and then you go, oh my God, I had no idea. And that colors the beginning of your document. And that has happened to me many times. And that's one of the joys of the whole process, is not only thinking about what you want to tell other people, but thinking about what you want to tell in the beginning. And that comes down to the one thing I wanted to show you. I'm going to do a screen share now. And tell me if you can see this. Let's see. We have deduction versus induction. Can everybody see this chart?
Yes.
Okay, so deductions on the left, inductions on the right. I always forget which one. But sometimes we start from, the theory. The theory might be, I believe in being honest. And then you might go down, and maybe it's not hypothesis, observation, but for us it's story. So you can replace observation with story. So you might come up with an idea, okay, my parents taught me this, or I always think about how important it is to be a hard worker. And then you might come up with a story that illustrates that. Or you might come up with the story first, and then you realize, wait a minute, like the way Bob was talking, wait a minute, I didn't realize how important it was for me to, in my life, for being honest, and until I remembered that story about my parents, and so it might go either way for you. So that might be helpful for you a little bit. Okay, now, bless you. Let me talk a little bit about a few ways that we're up to number 6. We're going to be talking about a little bit about editing, and so it sounds to me like some of you might be ready to edit, some of you are still writing. So, but I'm going to talk a little bit about writing now. And can everybody see this, how to be memorable in your writing? Some of what I say now may answer some of these questions, okay? And if you have any I think I'll just take a minute to mute everyone. And let's see. Or if you have anything going on in the background, unless you mute yourself, please. So this is a list that I've come up with for my students. And I work a lot with high school students. Hold on one second. I'm just going to go back and, all right. So I'm going to mute everybody so it'll be a little bit quieter. So when people listen to this on the recording, that they'll be able to hear a little bit better. So this may answer some of the questions, specifically the question about how to be, to maybe not sound so prideful, how to, let's see, I came up with this list because a lot of people want to talk about something they feel good about, but they don't want to sound like they're bragging or they're prideful or however else there might be an emotion attached to what they have to say that they think might affect the reader. So these are tips that always seem to work. So first of all, sensory details.
Debbie, we don't have the screen share on.
Oh, I don't. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for reminding me that. Let me go back to my screen share. Okay. All right. Now, can everybody see how to be memorable in your writing? And by the way, I'm going to send out this in my notes like I sent it out last time. So you can write it down, but I will also send it to you. How to be memorable in your writing. So in this list, this is also a list of 8 things. Sensory details, which includes anything in your 5 senses. Writing is basically words on a page. Writing can include images, Mark. I absolutely agree. And words on a page can only do so much to help us feel the real experience. But sensory details help a lot. Colors, smells, sounds, textures, and tastes. Names. I'm a big believer in names of places, books, things. So I think that you can get a lot of mileage out of talking about some of your favorite books, for example. Nouns. interesting things. For example, your grandfather's watch. I don't know if you can you see me as well? This is my grandfather's watch, and I never met my grandfather, but I could write a story about that that would be very meaningful to me. I've been winding it every morning during quarantine, and it's still working. Dialogue. You can put dialogue in there, and we talked. Someone was mentioning. I think Beth had mentioned about maybe phrases that she saw online. Well, I also think that a great list of phrases is phrases that your parents said to you that you remember, or phrases that you say to your parents. Before class started, I said something to Betty about some phrases that she had said to me. So family phrases, I think, are really valuable. Numbers and values, quantify if you want to talk about something being important to you. Recently, I calculated that we take 10,000 breaths every waking day, and that's not including the sleeping part. And numbers can really pack a punch in a small area. Metaphors. People love reading metaphors. It makes it much easier. You know, when writing about family to me is like taking a bath in a warm pool. It's comfortable and refreshing. Thoughts and emotions. Someone had talked about that. I think Miriam asked that question about, well, when I write, do I say I'm in a good mood? Absolutely. I think you should talk about your mood in your writing, because if I was reading something from, say, my grandmother who said, I'm in a great mood now, but I do have to tell you that I feel X, Y, and Z, I would feel closer to her as a writer. And that's one of the reasons that we're writing this, is to connect with our reader. So if you want to talk about your emotions, or you want to invoke emotions, that's what writing does. The best writing can invoke emotions. So don't be afraid to say something that you're hoping will get a laugh, or if it gets some crying. I mean, I have been flattered by people saying they cried when they read my writing, which sounds like a weird thing to say, but at least it meant to me that I impacted the reader. And frankly, if I feel like I'm feeling some choking up while I'm writing, to me, that's also a good sign. If I can get if I'm crying while I'm writing it, sounds good to me. So go for that stuff. Don't try and water it down at all. And surprises, you know, people love surprises. So if you know, in a joke stream of 3 things is usually you know, 2 things that you expect, and then the third one they'll throw something in left field, and that's how jokes often work. You can continue to read this. It's about where you can pack a punch. I believe that if you really want to get something across, try and put it at the beginning or the end, or the beginning and end of a sentence, or the beginning, end of a paragraph. But if you stick something in the middle of a sentence, in the middle of the paragraph, in the middle of your piece, people won't notice it. So if something's important, give it some white space. Okay, so that's a quick lesson on how to be memorable in your writing. Editing your ethical will, and some people aren't up to this yet, but I'm just going to give this about a minute. You know, you're going to start with the big stuff. When at some point you're going to edit. Maybe you're not ready yet. I'm not sure anybody is, from what I've been hearing, but at some point you'll be editing. And the great thing about editing is that the more you have to edit. But you know, ask yourself, what does the reader learn about me from this? Because you write it for yourself, but when you edit, you might want to think a little bit more about the reader. Show, don't tell. We just talked about how to be, all those ways of being memorable. Those were showing, not telling. Let it marinate. I think Bob might have mentioned this, that if you let something sit for a day or 2, the next day you pick it up, you'll see things you didn't see before. Sometimes I like to say typos reproduce while you're sleeping. So yeah, you'll see the typos, but also it will have a different meaning than it had the day before. So it's helpful to look at things on successive days. And red flags. If you read anything and it makes you feel uncomfortable, I think this might be helpful for Alita. If you don't want to read it, maybe you don't want to write it either. You know, so you have to feel comfortable with whatever is on the page. That's my feeling, unless you really want to shake up the reader. But so you can ask yourself that question. In terms of, you may or may not want to ask for feedback. This is a personal document, so it's very like this one is totally optional. But one way you can get feedback is you can get feedback by yourself by just reading it out loud. I'm a big believer in reading out loud. You'll hear your words, they'll come back to you. If you want to have somebody listen, but you don't want them to give you any of their feedback, because sometimes feedback is not always helpful, you can just say, I just want you to listen to this and just say to me when I'm done, thank you. And then you just can read it to maybe someone. Here's a couple of other ways that sometimes you can get people to give you feedback. You can just read something to them and ask them if they remember any exact phrases that they heard, and to recount those back to you. It's a much harder exercise than it sounds. It's amazing. You can read something for a couple minutes and people might remember one or two words, but you know those words had an impact on them. You can ask them what they learned about you from hearing that, and that's always interesting. And you can also ask them what confused them or intrigued them or made them feel uncomfortable. So those are very good questions to ask. I would say, if you do share your draft with anyone, I wouldn't just give it to them and not guide them. You have to be very specific when you ask people for any feedback and be very clear about what you want to hear. And then in the third edit, it's going to be, you're going to smooth it out like a nice smooth sail on the water. You're going to read it out loud, listen for awkward phrases and so forth, and smooth transitions between paragraphs. And here I have a list of some transitional phrases, which I will also send to you. So it is 11:57, and if I go back to the plan that I had for today, let's see. We will see that Debbie didn't do as great in terms of planning for today as last time, but that's okay because we had a great time talking and sharing. I was hoping to give everyone 10 minutes of, we've gotten through 6. We haven't gotten to time for writing or editing. And we haven't really talked about how we're going to share it. So, and we haven't done our Mishabera. So the question is that I want to ask everybody, and I'm going to stop sharing now so we can all see each other. It's 11:58. Do we want to extend class for 20 minutes and see if we can get through my agenda? How many people would like to stay until 11:20? Let's see a show of hands. Okay. So I think what we will do, so some people are yes and some people are no. So what I think we're going to do is I'm going to go over what we're going to handle next week, and we'll have a Mishabera, and then I'm going to have everybody stay for about 10 minutes to do some writing or editing, and then we'll also get back to see if we can just do a final share of questions and also comments about the process. So if you can stay, great. If you can't stay, I also understand. So next week, our third and final week, but we'll also talk about whether there's options for extending if you're feeling as though this is helpful for you. Next week, once again, bring what you have and see if you can keep refining it based upon what we talked about today. Keep writing. See if you want to make it longer and answer some of your questions and fill in your blanks for your lists. Keep doing that. If you feel like it's long enough, you can start to boil it down and edit it like we talked about. So next week, we're going to talk about ways that we're going to share it. I know that was one of the questions that came up today. We'll also keep sharing about what the process is like, and we'll work a little bit more on editing. Now, I do want to encourage you as a writer who responds well to deadlines, and that one thing I like about this class is it's a deadline. So I want to encourage you to look at the end of next class as a deadline. So, because I know as a writer, things can go on forever. So see what you have. I think even if I said to you, okay, time's up right now, you would all have something to share, whether you want to call it an ethical will or a legacy letter. So see if you can push yourself a little bit so that it's pretty much done by the end of next week as best as you can. Okay. All right. So any quick questions from anyone?
Debbie, I just wanted to say I have to teach a lesson, so I'm
okay.
going to go. But
would you mind
awesome again?
Would you mind singing a Mishabera for us?
I would.
Would that be possible?
It would if we do it now. Yeah.
Let's do it now, Annie. Thank you so much.
Are you going to screen share the words for people? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Let me do that. Let me screen share, and there we go. Can everybody see that?
Yeah. So if people want to just take just a couple seconds to think about people that they are holding in their hearts in need of prayers for healing. Also, sometimes holding yourself in your heart in that way, because we all need some healing. Misheberach Avotenu Mekor habracha Limotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misheberach Imotenu Mekor habracha Lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Thank you, Annie.
Thanks.
Of all who are in need of healing right now, and there are so many. So thank you all for coming. we are going to extend for about 15 or 20 minutes because I think it's great to have some writing. So if you need to jump off now, I understand. And if you could stay for about 20 minutes and do a little bit of writing and talking, please stay. We'll have the extension where we're going to have some writing time. So thank you all. Looking forward to seeing you next time.
Debbie, do we stay connected?
Yes, so we're still on.
Okay.
Okay. So welcome all of you once again, and thank you. So what my concept is that we are going to take about 10 minutes. How many people here, I want to ask for the show of hands, how many people here feel like they are still at the writing stages as opposed to editing? How many people are, okay. And how many people here are thinking about doing some editing? Okay, so a couple people are thinking about doing editing. Okay, so this is your 10 minutes to do whatever you want. Now let's just talk for a minute about writing and editing. Writing is to me filling in the holes. So you come up with an idea and you just go for it. But sometimes editing is also filling in holes. So editing can mean making things longer for a while, and editing can also mean crossing out duplication, moving things around, putting things in the right order. So I'm going to set a timer for 10 minutes. Does anybody have any questions before then about what we're going to be doing or what you're going to be doing? Okay, so I'll come back on in about 10 minutes, and then we'll have about a 5-minute or so sharing and wrap up. Okay, everybody have their project to work on. So ready, begin. Okay, I had paused. Okay, Trudy, could you ask your question again?
Sure, if I can remember. Yes, I wonder, because I'm thinking of this whole project in kind of a different way, but I wonder if you can add photos to it. Like I remember a sign that said, well, I took a picture of this sign that told me a lot. It said something about don't have expectations because it'll only lead to sorrow. So, and I would like that to include that photo that I took. I was with Miriam.
Absolutely.
Good.
I'm a big believer. I think I may have mentioned to you, I've just finished a memoir, which in some ways is this is not the cover that's going to be. It's I haven't seen the cover. It's a temporary cover, but it's called From the Period to the Colon: Memoir of a Child Writer.
Oh, how wonderful!
But I have a ton of photos in here. I'd say I have at least 100 photos. So,
could I take this and turn it into a mobile? You know, a piece of art?
Absolutely. That's going to be one of the things we talk about. In fact, thank you for reminding me, and I will write this to everyone. I forgot to mention that at the end of the class. I apologize, but one thing I was going to say, that if you wanted to come next week with your markers, if you want to make this something handwritten, bring your, if you want to have some nice paper, however you want to do it, bring it for next time, and we'll see if we can get going on that time. So, sure.
Debbie,
Okay. Yes.
Tonight, am I interrupting?
Yes.
Are you finished?
Did you finish?
Yeah.
I'm finished. And are you finished? Judy?
Okay, I just wanted to say two things
Yes,
that are really important.
And you know, your camera's off.
My camera.
Yes.
Oh,
here.
all right.
And then I think Betty has a question as well. Yes, tell me, Elida.
I can get my camera back on. I don't know why, but anyway, I will start video. Is that it? There it goes. Okay. Earlier, I was struggling with two things. One of them is that my husband and I had started writing a family history. We started at when we got married, or a little before. But the interesting thing about it was we had trying to incorporate photographs into it. And we've gotten overwhelmed several times and stopped the project, but we just bought a scanner. And so I think that's been one of the issues for me, is that we're writing it from a different perspective, and we're calling it a family history, which is a way to get around some of my issues that I just didn't want to bring up in any kind of negative way at all. The other thing is I am an amateur artist, and I think that I take out my emotions and feelings in my art.
Right.
Several people, well, not that many, but a few have seen some of my work, and my grandchildren have asked for my work when they've seen photographs of it, and when I'm in San Francisco. And so both of them have some of my paintings. And I think for me, expression in the paintings, it's so much easier than in the written word.
Right. So you might also want to include a photograph of some paintings that are meaningful to you in your ethical well. For example, you can see there's something on my wall back
I
there.
noticed it behind you. I wanted to add.
So that's a painting that I did. And it's a sunset, and it's all about my parents. And on one side I have what my mom used to say. On the other side I have what my dad used to say. And
Are they in conflict? Are they
no, it's like their favorite sayings.
Oh, I see.
No.
I see. Yeah.
So include your artwork, include your photos, absolutely. And at least for now, think. My encouragement to you, I like to think, because I'm a person who sometimes has big ideas and doesn't get things done, I would say think as small as possible. think about what can you do to get done by next week. And think if that's 1 or 2 pages, and you're gonna print out a few photos and paste them on some pages too, go for it. And you can always make it bigger, but I think start small so that it's done, because if it doesn't get finished, it might not get finished. I hope that helps. Yes, Laura.
Am I unmuted? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I think sort of in an overall sense, what I'm hearing is that this can be anything we want it to be.
Right.
You know, you can so totally personalize this and make it what you want. What I've been doing is I'm making this a letter to my grandson to give him on his bar mitzvah, which is what I told Debbie before. So, and I'm including the things that were important to me in my lifetime. So I'm telling about important things in my lifetime. But I think it's so important that we are all so different from each other, that we make this what is important to us. It's something you want to share, however you want to share it, however you want to say it, and whether in pictures or words or whatever, that's okay, because that's you. And I love to write. And so I'm writing my grandson a letter. I wrote him the first letter that he's receiving. He should get it today. And I'm very curious what he thinks of a letter, 3 pages, double space from grandma. I don't know what he's going to think about it, but I'm very curious about it, because that's what I'm writing right now. And I'm planning to give this to him later. So.
Good. All right. I think that's helpful. Yes. Yes. It is what it is for you.
Yeah.
It is what it is for you. Okay. We're going to try and wrap up. Anyone have any last comments or thoughts or questions? All right. So I will see you next week. And if you have any supplies that you want to bring to create your ethical will, your legacy letter, bring it next week. And I want to thank you all for coming and extending, and I encourage you to keep writing, and it's so great to see your smiling faces. So this is your ethical will class, and this is Thursday, April 23rd, 2020. Thumbs up from everyone.
Yes.
Everyone stay
Thank
safe.
you.
Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome.
Oh, here.
This was great. Thanks,
Bye,
Debbie.
Sam.
I'm glad you.
Bye, Abby.
Bye. Thanks, Betty.
Bye,
Bye,
thank
Abby.
you.
Bye.
It was great.
Oh, I'm so
Loved
glad
it.
you enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Bye-bye.
Great. Thank you so much for contributing. Elida, if you want to stay on for 1 minute after.
Oh, all right. Yeah. I think what I was trying to say, Debbie, is that I think I better express my